Welcome to Season 3 of Far Reach Voyages, where we share our love of sailing and adventure travel. If you are new to the channel, I rebuilt the Far Reach from a gutted bare hull over a 6-year period. You can get a brief summary of the rebuild in Season 1, Episode 1, or you can read the 5-part series I wrote for Practical Sailor magazine, which started in November 2022. You can also visit our websites to learn the details of the rebuild. The links are in the video description. In the last episode, I single-handed the Far Reach 1,340 nautical miles from North Carolina back to the Virgin Islands for the second time. It ended with me anchored in St. Thomas, waiting for my wife to fly in and join me. She had remained in North Carolina helping her kids navigate the Byzantine college application process. I, on the other hand, had to suffer the hardship of living on a boat in the tropics where perfect sailing conditions exist pretty much every day. I don't have a water maker on the Far Reach, nor a desire for one, so one of my tasks is to haul water. We carry 90 gallons aboard in 4 tanks, and I can make that last about 60 days if required. But when water is available, we obviously use more. I typically haul about 30 gallons every 2 weeks. Our hard dinghy Sweet Pea is perfect for transporting it. She can carry a lot of weight and rows easily. We carry the water in 5-gallon collapsible jugs. Once I have the water jugs aboard the boat, I pour them into the tanks via a homemade Baja filter. I store the 14-foot-long water hose in the boom. In St. Thomas, I was forced to find an outboard for our dinghy because Crown Bay Marina, where we get our potable water, does not allow you to row into the dock. It's a BS rule. There's a long story about this ridiculousness, which you can read about on our website. So a friend loaned me a non-working Honda 2-horsepower air-cooled engine and said, "You can get it working, it's yours to use." I took it apart and cleaned the components and added new fuel. It took about 2 hours to get it running. Though I'm a military-trained diver, I'm not interested in carrying a full suite of dive gear. It's just too much stuff to carry and requires more maintenance than I'm interested in performing. But I thought having a simple, easy-to-stow hookah could be useful, and I became friends with Scotty at High Tech Dive Shop in St. Thomas. Scotty built me a simple hookah for about $100. It works great. I don't carry a tank. I just rent one when I need to scrub the bottom or work on the mooring chain. The couple of times I've used it, it's worked great. Living on the boat on the hook or on a mooring can be very relaxing. Though I live to sail, tropical boat life is hard to beat. One of my pet peeves are dinghies without rub rails, which are a terror at the dinghy dock. The ragged gunnels can shred an inflatable and gouge the gel coat on a hard dinghy. It's thoughtless to take something like this to a public dock. It shows a complete lack of respect for anyone else. A great friend loaned me his mooring for the season. What a blessing to have one in a crowded anchorage. All I had to do was add a couple shackles and splice a new pendant. This became our base of operations for 5 months. Finally, Gayle arrived. It was great to have her back on the boat. A good friend baked her a scratch-built cake for Valentine's Day. For the next 3 months, Gayle and I did all the things you normally do when living aboard a boat in the Virgin Islands. We settled into a relaxed routine. We had time to talk about whatever we wanted to in an unhurried, easy manner. We read books and described our favorite parts. We swam every day. We cooked and baked bread. And we hiked and explored. We discovered Cafe Bustelo, which is especially good when made with an AeroPress. And even though I had installed LED lighting after the last voyage, we continued to prefer the quiet, relaxing mood created by kerosene lighting. We sailed the 15 miles to Culebra and had a fine time. We walked all over this historic island. We took the ferry 25 miles to Puerto Rico, debarking at the deserted ex-U.S. Navy base at Roosevelt Roads. I had passed through Rosie Roads on a frigate when I was a young midshipman. We rented a car there and had a blast. We drove up to the Yonke rainforest and saw amazing waterfalls and magnificent trees. We hiked through gorgeous fauna on rainforest trails. I was stunned by the island's beauty. It was hard to leave, and we definitely hoped to go back to Puerto Rico again. After Puerto Rico, we sailed back to St. Thomas, and then soon thereafter we beat east up the coast, across Pillsbury Sound and into the British Virgin Islands. The BVI was still in recovery mode after getting smashed by Cat 5 Hurricane Irma just 2.5 years earlier. We also linked up with our friends Alibaba and Eurinthia, who own and operate a beach bar and restaurant along with a few guest cottages on Joost Van Dyke. Next we sailed the 40 miles to St. Croix, perhaps the most beautiful island in the Virgin Islands. We spent a wonderful week there enjoying the fabulous architecture. We found a great bar with an elevated view of the Caribbean on the North Shore. And all too soon, it was late in April. We had a great sail back to St. Thomas on a beam reach and a 20-knot trade wind breeze. A few days later, Gayle caught her flight back home to help the kids with their college selection. And though I would rather have had her stay on the boat, I admit I also enjoy being alone sometimes. There's a big difference between being lonely and being alone. I think it's good for people to spend time by themselves. It is for me anyway. But also it's important to stay busy. I made a bunch of new cruiser friends and we enjoyed a dinghy raft up potluck. A friend took these pictures as I sailed past in Sweet Pea on a windy day. I love this kind of sailing. It's how I learned to sail as a youngster. You can't do this in an inflatable. Keeping your boat and her system simple allows you to focus inward and create some distance between you and the external influences that often put us in a reactive mode. Simple living provides time for introspection and seems more soul-enriching to me. I think it helps me stay more connected to the environment and helps me also stay psychologically balanced. While it was windy in the Virgin Islands, there was little wind north of us due to the position of the Bermuda High. This no wind zone that I would have to pass through on the way home was to remain established longer than usual. While I had hoped to head home in early May, I would ultimately not be able to start the voyage till the middle of June, and this turned out to be a good thing. What did I do? Well, I went sailing, of course. I had a wonderful sail to a special cove where I hung out on the hook for about 10 days. I love this kind of sailing. If you ever wondered what it's like to tack a boat this size by yourself, this is an example of how I do it. With the staysail rigged on an easily removable Dyneema forestay, it's easy to pull the bag sail back out of the way so the fore triangle is clear. Here I'm looking back and with my hand pulling on a thin line that runs back to the vane, presetting the Cape Horn wind vane to the new course. Then I disengage the vane by pulling back on 2 lines at the front of the cockpit below the traveler. With my legs straddling the tiller, I steer the boat through the wind and onto the new course. As soon as the bow is head to wind, I release the old jib sheet and start pulling in on the new jib sheet, still steering the boat with my legs. As quickly as I can, I hand over hand the jib sheet in as far as possible before I feed the sheet into the self-tailer. Then I start cranking on the winch to sheet the jib into its proper final position, now steering with my free hand on the tiller. Though truth be told, the boat will generally start steering herself by the time I'm cranking on the winch, so all I have to do is fine-tune her. At this point, I move to the front of the cockpit and reach down and grab the 2 lines just below the traveler that allow me to engage the wind vane. I look back over my shoulder to see if the wind vane blade is vertical and thus properly set, and then engage the wind vane so the vane is now steering the boat. Now it's just a matter of fine-tuning the sails and the wind vane. You can see I'm adjusting the traveler, pulling the lower main sheet block to windward. What I should have done is made that adjustment before I initiated the tack. And with a long bowsprit I added to the far reach and her taller mast, I don't need an overlapping jib to keep the boat powered up even in light winds, so it tacks quickly and easily. I can short tack the far reach, tack upon tack, up through a narrow channel as many times as necessary, just as easily as shown here. With all this time on my hands, I spent even more time in the water than usual. I had plenty of time to practice my new interest in free diving. I explored the reefs running across stingrays, nurse sharks, lobster, and all the typical fish you see on Caribbean reefs. I made a little chart and checked off every kind of fish I could spot. Even though many of the Virgin Island reefs are in pretty bad shape, the fish are still amazing to observe. Anchored on a sandy bottom, the clear water often had an incredible but surreal blue tint to it. It didn't look real, and I'm happy to see the GoPro accurately capture the color. Here's a barracuda maintaining station under a ledge. Here's a pair of beautiful gray angelfish. They swim so gracefully. I spotted this beautiful blue juvenile damselfish, and if you look quick at the top of the screen, you'll see a blue-headed wrasse. They were always fun to spot on the reef. Without any distractions or competing demands in my life, I spent plenty of time just clowning around. While I haul a lot of water to the boat to refill our tanks, there's nothing like catching water in a tropical downpour. And no water tastes better than rainwater. Using just a simple 6-foot by 6-foot canvas awning, I collected over 30 gallons of water one morning. It gave me an idea for a larger awning better suited for rainwater collection, which I built the following year. With still no sight of wind north of the Virgin Islands, I took a deep dive back into celestial navigation, which I was first introduced to as a teenager. I reread books I learned on as a kid when celestial was the only way to navigate offshore. I took sunshots every day and star fixes every night. It was a lot of fun and not very difficult, even though I worked them out longhand, reducing the shots using HO 249 in the Nautical Almanac. I printed out a worksheet and had a local print shop make me a bunch of copies. That made it a little bit easier. Finally, by early June, it was beginning to look like I might be able to start the voyage home. But if you want to find out how that turned out, you'll have to wait for the next episode. If you enjoyed this episode of Far Reach Voyages, let us know in the comments. Also, consider liking and subscribing, as it tells us you would like to see more videos and it helps the channel grow. See you next episode.